All right. All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. I'm Sheila Ryan, Cuddle Ambassador for Shannon Fabrics, and I'm in South Texas, where we just got done with our very short, long winter, and today is summery. So I hope that the weather is pleasant wherever you guys are. So check in with me. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you still snowed in? Are you having the freezing cold, or are you back to what is normal for your area? So let me know. I'm always curious to see where everybody's tuning in from. So this is National Embroidery Month, and we have a really fun project, but I want to talk a little bit about machine embroidery too. That is my one true love, I suppose. My second is working with Cuddle fabric. And so we're going to blend those two things together today. And I can't wait to show you some of my favorite tips and then some fun projects with Cuddle fabric. But the first thing I want to ask you to do is if, in addition to commenting and liking this video, would you share it on your social medias as well? When you do that, you'll be entered to win some of the same fabric that we're going to be using in today's project. And let me just show you the fabric. So you'll win a yard of our new quilting Cuddle, and this color is called Black Cherry. It's so gorgeous. It's a solid, and it is so silky and soft and wonderful to work with. I'll share my little tips. But you'll also win a yard of Luxe Cuddle Hide, which is a 10 millimeter pile in the color Natural. So this is one of my favorite. Well, both of these are some of my, did I say my favorite? Like every time I get a new fabric, it's my favorite. So you're going to get some of my favorites today if you're the winner. So like the video, share it, and then join in the conversation with us. If you have questions as we go along, let me introduce Ginger McLeod. She's our education manager, and she is the voice in the background. So as we're working through the project, if you have a question and I don't see it, she's going to pop in here with me and just be an audio ask the question. You may have seen the last Cuddle Conversations we did where we actually introduced Ginger and then found out some of her favorites, favorite things to make, favorite Cuddle fabrics. But Ginger's here in the background with us, helping us with all of the thing, and then also getting all of our links. If you're watching over on YouTube, say hi to Jackie Hillman. She's our Cuddle ambassador in Wisconsin. And I had to think about what I was like, it's somewhere cold. So Jackie's in Wisconsin, and she's running the comments over there on YouTube. And so say hi to Jackie, say hi to Ginger in the comments. And then I see other Cuddle ambassadors already joining in on the chat. And so I'm so glad that y'all are here. I see Ajer and Stephanie, and I'm sure there'll be others popping in, but it's really fun to see you here. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do. So I want to talk about machine embroidery, because that's what I love talking about. I mean, I love talking about sewing, but machine embroidery like just makes my heart sing. And so a lot of people wonder, can you even do machine embroidery on Cuddle fabric? And so my answer, the short answer is, of course you can. Yes, absolutely. But you might want some tips, or you might want to do some techniques to make sure that your embroidery shows up really well or not on your Cuddle fabric. So with machine embroidery, the needle's moving really fast. Your embroidery machine is programmed to run a design, whether it's a quilting design where it's just the stitches, or it's lots of layers of thread so that you can actually see the embroidery. And that can be a challenge on Cuddle fabric. So part of what I want to do today is talk about how we can either mitigate that or use it to our advantage. In our project here, we're actually going to use, do some things that are a little bit non-traditional with machine embroidery. We're going to make this cute cube. Okay, I had to trim a thread that I just saw right there. So we're going to make this cute cube. It says love on it when you spin it around, Love. There we go. And then it has some heart appliques on the top and bottom. It's a square. I mean, it's a cube, so it's made out of squares. This is not a hard project at all. I built this with machine embroidery letters that you can get over on the Designs by Baby Moon website. You don't have to use that pattern to make this block. If you do machine embroidery and you have some applique letters that you use for maybe making sweatshirts or baby blankets, anything that's big, the small letters are about 3 inches tall, and the big letters are about 4.5 to 5 inches tall-ish round. And so they can fit in your 4x4 or 5x5, 5x7 hoops. That's what most embroidery machines come standard with. So you can use any lettering set. I designed these letters and the little heart shape so that they stitch really fast, because I kind of like an instant gratification project. If it's not fast and it's not fun, I kind of get bored, and then I'm like, I'm out. I don't have time to wait for, I mean, sometimes you do, but a thick satin stitch that takes an hour to stitch around, I don't have time for that. So I made a nice little blanket stitch, which is super fun because it does stitch pretty fast, but it also gives us some interesting texture. And I'm all about texture with machine embroidery in Cuddle. So let me show you what I mean. So if I get real close here, you can kind of see, I still have some trimming to do on this one, but you can kind of see the little the little blanket stitches that are along the edge. Maybe it's easier to see on the E. There we go. So instead of this being a big, thick satin stitch up and down the edges of these letters, it's a blanket stitch. Let's see over here for the, there you go, for the Instagram people. You have a little bit different view. So it kind of just, it's an applique. So instead of doing a zigzag or doing it on your sewing machine, which you absolutely can do if you don't have an embroidery machine, you could totally do it like that. But if you have an embroidery machine, the process is a little bit more automated. It's also a lot more precise. So I have to say that I'm not the best at doing applique with the sewing machine on anything, cotton fabric, Cuddle fabric, denim. Like, it's just not my jam. And it's probably because I've spent time learning the embroidery machine rather than learning how to do it over there. And so that's just easier for me on the embroidery machine. So that's the way I'm going to do it. Okay. So anyway, so we're going to make this little block. I'm going to show you how to do these letters, but I want to show you a couple of more embroidery things just while we're here, and one non-embroidery thing. So I don't know if you've heard about Barkley. So Barkley is our super cute pre-cut puppy. He's so cute. I mean, he's just started showing up in your stores that carry Cuddle fabric. So if you have a store that you get Cuddle fabric, you can get a Barkley kit. So Barkley comes pre-cut, so you don't have to cut out anything. All the pieces are in there. He comes with even an embroidery file if you want to do machine embroidery eyes. He comes with little applique eyes. I use shiny safety eyes on him because I just love those. I think they're super cute. He was super fun to put together. Anyway, Barkley is available now. So if you haven't seen Barkley in your stores, ask for him. So if your store carries Cuddle, they can get Barkleys too. We've had Harper for a little bit in stores. And so this Harper is the version that I made after I had my kit and I had the pattern. So I traced off my pattern and I used it to make a Harper out of my own fabric. And for this Harper, I used Lux Cuddle Seal. So it's a smooth Cuddle that doesn't have a lot of texture. You can see the texture from sewing the dart and his seam in the back there, but it's a very smooth and silky Cuddle. And so I did that with this Harper, and then I embroidered on his ear. So I'm showing you Harper because Harper and Barkley have these cute places where you could add embroidery. So you could add it on the ear, you could add it on their foot pads, you could add it on Barkley's tummy. Wouldn't that be super cute for some initials or something? But yes, you can add embroidery to your Cuddle projects. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to get that to happen. Okay. So if you have any questions specifically about machine embroidery, be sure to drop those in the comments so that we can make sure that we get your questions answered. Okay. Yes, I see lots of excitement about both Harper and Barkley. They're super fun. And like I said, they're pre-cut. So you get your packet, your kit, and then you get to sewing right away. So yeah, already cut is absolutely the way to go. Okay. Oh, Brenda says she already purchased Barkley. Yay. So glad. Awesome. Okay. Let's put Barkley and Harper aside. And then let's talk about, oh, I want to show you one more thing from machine embroidery. So Barkley and Harper, on Harper, you could see how that, you could see that embroidery. It was a sew together embroidery on his ear. This is another example of machine embroidery, but I want you to see the texture. So this is like just texture from machine embroidery. Can you see the XOXO? It's kind of like quilting. I mean, it is quilting. It actually is quilting. The whole project's done in the hoop, but you see the texture from the stitches rather than seeing the thread itself. Okay, so that's the kind of effect we're going for today. We'll talk a little bit more about that Harper embroidery so that I can tell you a little bit about how to get those threads to show up. But what we're doing today is we're just getting texture from our machine embroidery and letting the embroidery machine do the work of applique. Jana, I see your question. What stabilizer and needle do you recommend? This is such a good question, and it's really one of the first places we start when we're working on a Cuddle project. So when we're sewing with Cuddle fabric, we like to use a 9014 stretch needle. My favorite are the Schmetz 9014 stretch needles that I use on my sewing machine. We use a thicker needle because Cuddle is a thicker fabric. It's a little bit heavier, and that gives your machine the ability to go through the thickness of the fabric with ease. We lengthen our stitch length. We do these things to kind of compensate for using a thicker fabric over there. With machine embroidery, the embroidery machine works a little bit different. It's faster. Your embroidery machine may be going up to 15 or 1800 stitches per minute. I mean, super fast. And generally what I'm doing when I'm doing machine embroidery is I'm going to use my regular 7511 sharp embroidery needle. I use a ballpoint needle with machine embroidery when I'm doing something like a t-shirt knit. Now, Cuddle's a knit fabric, but it doesn't get holes in it and run or fall apart, kind of like those other jerseys. So it's a lot more stable. It's a very stable knit fabric. And so for machine embroidery, I don't change anything. I don't use a ballpoint needle. I use the regular embroidery needle that I use for almost all of my other projects. If you start to see that you're getting skipped stitches, then the first thing I always recommend is to check your needle. Like maybe you need to go up to an 8012 needle or even a 9014 needle for your machine embroidery. Generally, I have never used a 9014 needle in my embroidery machine for anything, actually. And I've embroidered on some weird stuff. So I haven't needed to do that, even on multiple layers of Cuddle fabric with like batting or anything or thick stabilizer. I haven't had to do that. For my sewing machine, I absolutely have changed the needles. And I've even, when I'm making a bag or something, I might need to go up to a 116 needle or a 110 18 needles. So something that's really heavy duty, especially if I've got a lot of layers and I've got soft and stable, maybe I've got piping in there. Then I will think about the needle that I'm using because my machine's, it's got a different kind of power. And I'm also doing different things. I'm not doing a lot of heavy construction on the embroidery. I'm just doing embellishments. Somebody else asked, what is the best thread to use when constructing Barkley? That's a great question. And I'm going to tell you, it depends on what machine you're using, because if you're using your sewing machine, we generally recommend a 40 or 50 weight polyester sewing thread. I have started actually using, we haven't talked about this among the Cuddle ambassadors, but I've actually started to use an even thicker polyester thread. And I'll talk about that more as when we get to finishing up this cube. But I've been using like a bonded polyester thread. So this one comes on a great big cone, and you can get this at your quilt shop. If your quilt, especially if your quilt shop does like garments or bags, bonded polyester is pretty easy to find, although it's primarily in more upholstery applications. So it's a little bit thicker. The weight of it is about, It's designated as TEX is the weight. So TEX 35 is the weight that I use for my bonded polyester thread that I like to get. It feels a little bit thicker and it's quite a bit stronger than really regular polyester thread. I can take a regular polyester thread and like stretch it and pop it, and I cannot with bonded polyester. And that is why I like using it for the stuffed animals. Okay. So, we've all experienced the thing when we're sewing something and then it gets used by a child, or, I mean, not even a child. I've done it myself. Like I've sewn a garment and then I've popped the seam. I mean, I've done it. I've done it. We've all done it. So I like this thicker thread for things that I'm not careful with, especially for stuffed animals because they get loved, or anything that needs kind of a heavy duty touch. I'm going to use a thicker thread. So that's not everybody's preference. You need to try what you have, what's available to you locally, and see how that acts on the fabric that you have. Jana says that her dog steals all her plushies. Dogs are number one reason why I'm going to use this thicker thread. It's just going to hold together. I use it a lot on making bags. It's a strong thread. I feel like it gives better, stronger construction for me. So it's just one option, but definitely a polyester thread. We're using polyester fabric. Cuddle's 100% polyester, so we're going to match our thread to get that. When I'm doing machine embroidery over on the embroidery machine, I'm using a 40 weight polyester embroidery thread. So I've got I think I have Isacord over on my embroidery machine right now. Generally, I just use regular bobbin thread, and I probably have something that's like a 40 weight in my bobbin right now. But for machine embroidery, you need to go with what your machine likes, because embroidery machines can be a little bit more finicky than your sewing machine. And some brands of thread work better in some embroidery machines. So because the machine that I was using when I started doing machine embroidery only liked Isacord, I have mostly Isacord thread, but there are many good brands of embroidery threads. So the brand is not as important as what your embroidery machine wants to use. For general sewing purposes, I'll use Metrocene polyester thread just for sewing. So you have lots of options. There's lots of great threads out there in the world, and there's not really one right answer. There's things that we've tried that we've found success with, but that's not the only thing. So, okay. Sewing machine needles, sewing machine thread, embroidery needles, embroidery thread. Let's talk about embroidery. So for this project, what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you some of the steps. Now, I've done a lot of this already behind the scenes. That way, we're not just sitting here watching my embroidery machine go. Because while I think that's fun, it doesn't make for great video content. Anybody that has an embroidery machine, we know how we get mesmerized. I was like, look, the machine's doing it. Now, if you have an embroidery machine, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't have an embroidery machine, let me just tell you, when we push the button on the embroidery machine and we allow it to do its thing, it's not like we can just go off and go do something else. We stay with our machine, and that's probably part of why it's so mesmerizing to watch. Because generally, if we turn our backs and go try to do something else in another room, or something could happen. We're working with layers of fabric, and not just regular flat fabric, nice fluffy plush fabrics. And so we want to stay with our machine while the process is happening so that we can make sure nothing happens over there without us noticing. Okay. So that's what we're going to do first. So the first thing that we need to do is look at some of the ingredients that we need. So Ginger has a list of materials, and she's going to pop that up on the screen, and then I'll show you what I have in front of you, in front of me, and then talk about it a little bit. So this file that we're using, the letters are all part of the Love Quiet block project. It's available over at my website, designsbybabymoon.com. And if you use code Shannon26, all capital letters, you can get this pattern or any of my Quiet Blocks patterns for 10% off till the end of the month because it's National Embroidery Month. And so, yay, any reason to have a little fun discount is a good enough one for me. So, and like I said, we're going to be using the quilting Cuddle in black cherry. We're going to be using Luxe Cuddle for the blocks sides. That's all this block is made out of. For stabilizer, I'm going to use a poly mesh stabilizer. We're going to talk about that, about why I picked that one. Of course, you'll need your embroidery machine. And then in this project, we're going to sew it together after the embroidery is all done on our sewing machine. So if you have a combo machine, you know, you'll do your embroidery and then you'll reset it for sewing. Or if you have two separate machines that do, you know, just one thing, then you'll get to use both of them. Of course, like I said before, we're going to use embroidery thread, sewing machine polyester thread, 9014 stretch sewing machine needle. If you have a stiletto, you might want to use it on this project. Another tool that I love using is called the Easy Point and Turner tool, and I'll show you that in a minute. And we'll need a hand sewing needle at the end, a little bit of that strong bonded polyester thread, and some polyfill fiber fill stuffing. All right, so let's go to the overhead camera, and I'll show you what I've got in front of me, because I want to show you what fabric is the top center block. That is, ooh, that is a good question. It is a
Hold, please. I'm having technical difficulties. Why is it not letting me? Get rid of the ingredient list. There we go.
there we go. Can you hear me? Hello. Tell Ginger, let me if anybody can hear.
Now we can hear you.
Okay. I wonder, did I go off for the ingredient list?
No, we heard the ingredient list. And then let's see if I can add in the sewing view. And if we can.
Maybe we add it instead of getting rid of me. Can you add it to the screen?
It's adding there. Let's see.
Okay.
There. Does that work? Okay.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, so that's what's right in front of me right here. And so that totally works. So thank you. We're going to figure this out. It's something new on StreamYard. Every time we jump in, they've changed everything around on us. So it just keeps us on our toes. Old dogs learning new tricks here. That's what we are. All right, let me show you what I've got. So here's my Cuddle. And I had a yard of each, and I have already cut the pieces that we need today, but I wanted to show you a little bit about what I did to them, because when you're doing a project like this, you have options. So you can pre-cut your squares, and then you would sew on the center of each square. Okay. To do that, there's some finagling that you have to do over on your embroidery machine to make sure that your embroidery is right in the center of these squares. Now, is it a life or death thing if your embroidery is not exactly centered? No, it's not. But we like to get things as centered as we can. And so there's a couple of different ways to do that. What I have done for today's project is I pre-cut my squares out of this after I fused SF101 to the back of the background fabric. I don't always do that. And I'll tell you why. Because when I'm doing machine embroidery, I'm thinking of my project and how I want it to feel, how I want the fabric to feel at the end, and how I want the whole thing to squish. So like when I'm doing, well, I'll just show you on this block. So this block is nice and soft, but it's really stable because the background pieces, these squares, have all had SF101 fused to the back of it. This block, let me grab this one from over here. This one, I did not fuse SF101 to the back of it. And it is very soft and very squishy. Okay, Lots and lots of fun. It's still cubish, but it's not as crisp of a cube, oops, as this one is. This one's a much crisper cube than this one. Okay, so this one's soft and squishy. The Cuddle has some stretch to it. It's a knit fabric, and you can see that happen. You can feel that on this blog. And it's a little bit less apparent. It's more square, more structured with the SF101 on the back of this fabric. Okay, so I did that on the background fabric. And then what I did, let's put these somewhere. I'm gonna have cubes all over the place. And then, so here's a piece of Cuddle. I cut them out. Okay, so I drew the squares the size that I needed them to be. I drew them onto the back of the SF101. I used the appropriate sized, ruler, and then I just cut them out. Now, we've talked about cutting Cuddle, and you know that if you use your rotary cutter, you're going to give the Luxe Cuddles a haircut and you're going to have fibers everywhere. For me, that's no big deal because I also have handy somewhere over here my shop vac, or not a shop vac. It's a little handheld vacuum cleaner that blows out the back. And that's what I did. I just vacuumed around each one of them. We're probably going to have to vacuum over here on the embroidery machine. So I keep that little handheld vac close to me while I'm making something. So that's how I did this. Now, if you want to fussy cut out, like say you've got your embroidery already done on a bigger piece, and then you want to cut your fabric down so that you can fussy cut and make sure that this is in the center, you absolutely could do that. I would still put SF101 on the back, do the machine embroidery and applique, and then come over here and then cut around it to fussy cut it. And you could fussy cut it from the back, put your template over the top. You could make a template out of clear plastic or just use a ruler that's that right size and then center it right here. Your embroidery files also come with a PDF. It's called a color map, but it's basically a full-size template so that you can make sure that your embroidery is right in the hoop as you do it. So there's lots of different ways to get to the point where you have this. These are just a couple of different ones. Okay, so those are already done. Here's my piece of fabric. The first thing that we have to do for our fabric is we have to figure out, which way the nap is going, right? And remember, like if you can't tell which way the nap is going, because it's soft and fluffy, and some of the Cuddles have more texture built into them than others. If you can't tell, it doesn't matter. But if you can tell, if it feels to you like you're petting a cat backwards, then you're going to pet it the other way till it feels smoother. And so what I do is on the back of that, I will make a T at the top, just a little bit in the seam allowance, or you could draw an arrow going down. So see how I wrote the T, or you draw the arrow. You could do it at the top or the bottom, just something to help you remember which way is going to be the right way, or top down, so that when you put your piece of applique fabric on top, okay, we'll just use this for applique, your applique fabric also is going to be oriented the same way. And that way, when you pet the whole block, because that's what we do with Cuddle, we pet it, but that way your hand doesn't have a stop. The whole thing feels smooth as you're going from top to bottom. Does that make sense? It feels better that way. Now, if you want to get different textures and your brain doesn't mind, the opposite textures on top of each other, you can absolutely do it the other way. This is what feels good to me, and so that's what I do. Okay, let's talk about the stabilizer that I'm using for machine embroidery. The SF101 is not a stabilizer. It's stabilizing our fabric. It's an interfacing, but it's not a machine embroidery stabilizer. So you can use a couple of different stabilizers. We're going to use a cutaway. And I like using a cutaway because it's a permanent stabilizer. It's going to support the embroidery stitches for as long as the project exists on the earth. It's in there, it's holding those stitches, it's doing its job and keeping everything together, keeping all of those stitches just looking their best on the project. A tearaway stabilizer is something that you would remove after you get done stitching, and you either tear it away, or sometimes they're like tear and wash. And so if you wash it, the fibers come out that way too. Um, I like to use a cutaway on my Cuddle projects, but I don't like those thicker cutaways that are more papery and thick. I like to use a sheer stabilizer. So what I have here, this is my bolt of Sulky Soft and Sheer. It's a cutaway permanent stabilizer. I just get it on the bolt because I use it so much. But it's a great stabilizer. You can get this at your quilt shop. If they don't have that brand, they may have their own brand, and it's usually called a no-show. So this is that same similar stabilizer on the store packaging, and it comes in these little rolls, which are really convenient for machine embroidery. It also comes in a fusible version. So you might want a fusible version of the cutaway stabilizer. And then just like we fused the SF101 to the back of the Cuddle, you could later, after your machine embroidery is done, iron the back side of your embroidery and then fuse the stabilizer on. So now it is one with your block. Okay. Now, remember I said I'm always thinking about, how do I want the embroidery to feel at the end? If I have too many layers of stabilizer, or if I have a stabilizer that's a little bit thicker or heavier, that is definitely going to affect the way my embroidered project feels. For a soft, squishy squish like this, something that's meant to be squishy, I don't want something stiff inside of it. You might want to have something that's very structured because they're just a display. It's not something that people are going to be touching and feeling and, playing with and then laying their head on or tossing around. You might want something with a little bit more structure. And in that case, definitely use a more structured stabilizer. But for me, I'm thinking about how do I want it to feel at the end of it. And this Soft and Sheer is perfect to me. It's very, very lightweight. It's very filmy, but it's still very strong enough to support my stitching. Okay, I'm going to set my stabilizer aside because that's a big bolt and I could trip over it. Okay, so what else do I have in front of me here? So I have a couple other things. There's our SF101. These are the pieces that I've already gotten done. You can see that we've gotten the O, the L, the V, the E, and I've already trimmed these up and then given them a little vacuum with my vacuum cleaner. So we've got a couple of blank ones. I'm going to do one heart. We'll do that over there. But I also have some other stuff, and I wanted to show you what else I have. So one of the things that I have over here is my taco box. So I told you I live in South Texas, right? So we get our tacos in boxes. I don't even know if y'all have tacos there, but tacos are a thing. And so we get our tacos in boxes, and they come a dozen in the box. And I've got a lot of kids. So 1 or 2 boxes of tacos is a meal for us, with sides and all kinds of stuff. So I save these taco boxes. Like when I get a new taco box, when we get tacos, I get the boxes. Also, they're pink, and I think that's super fun. Not every store does pink ones, but I happen to be a particular fan of the pink ones. So I save my taco boxes so that I can do my machine embroidery spraying in, and I'll use something like D505 spray to give the stabilizer just a little spritz. And I'll show you how I do it. Just a little spritz of the spray. I'm holding my spray probably about 12 to 15 inches away. And then I just a real quick little spray only on the stabilizer. The taco box has some sides. It's like a pizza box. And so that means that my spray doesn't go out over here onto my cutting mat, onto any other fabric. I certainly don't do this next to my machines, my sewing machine or my embroidery machine. A box like a taco box will keep that spray kind of contained for you. Of course, there are things like there's a spray tent you could use. You could do this outside. Just know that if you're spraying stuff, that spray is an aerosol and that goes through the air and it can, go places. So I use the box to keep that spray contained. Once I have my stabilizer sprayed, then I take it over to my embroidery machine and I hoop it. I know. I wish for all of you to be able to go get tacos in a box. Usually you have to get them by the dozen if you do that. But yeah, if you have a pizza box that you keep clean, you could use that too. Maybe you have to get the pizza really quick, or maybe you could talk your pizza guy into letting you have one. What else do I have in front of me here? Oh, well, of course I have scissors because we'll need to cut away some of our stabilizer. My Sharpie, of course, because we're always using a Sharpie or a permanent felt tip marker for Cuddle projects. And then I have this clever tool. So this is called the Easy Point and Turner. And this is a fun tool. It's like a big set of pinchers, really, but it's got a little hole here. Oh, let's see if I can get that in the frame. There it goes. It's got a little hole and a little point, and this little point nestles into this little hole, and it makes it really easy for turning things right side out. So let me show you on this block right here. So this block is one I finished last night. Let me turn it right back, wrong side out. And I'll show you how easy it is to use to turn things right side out, because we'll do this again in a minute because we'll have our block that we need to turn right side out. But this one is one that I just did that with my hands. So this is a little bitty one. The smallest size that I like making is these blocks are 6 inches square. Okay, I don't like to make them smaller than that, although you could, and that would be totally cute if you wanted to. But this one's 6 inches square, so this is all sewed together. And I use this little tool to go inside with one end, use the point to kind of poke into that little hole. And now instead of me using my hands to pull it through, I just kind of swish it onto the turner, and then I can kind of smooth it out, and it turns it right side out for me. And I haven't put a lot of stress on my hands. Okay, so if you have a hard time turning things right side out, this is the kind of tool you'll want to use. It's called the Easy Point and Turner, and you can get that at your quilt shop. They have those there. Okay, so that's why I have that here, and we'll use that again in a minute. The other thing I've got is I've got some scissors for trimming applique. Now these are a little bitty. They're by Havel's, and they have a nice little scoop at the tip. These are generally used for thread trimming, but I like to use it for trimming Cuddle appliques like we do over here, or we're going to do in a minute, because I need to get really, really close to the threads and to my stitching as I'm trimming. And you can see I could still do a little bit more over here. But when I have some seriously pointy tip scissors, whatever kind works for you, but you can get a lot closer. And when we're doing machine embroidery, people will be like, oh, it's not handmade. You just push the button and let that do its thing. I'm like, no, there's a lot of finishing. There's a lot of things that we're actually doing for machine embroidery. So don't let anybody tell you it's not handmade just because you pushed a button over there. Okay, are we ready to go over to the embroidery machine? Let's see, Ginger, would you switch my view so that we can see the embroidery machine? All right, there we are. All right, let's get him turned on. So let's see, he went to sleep. So I've got the file already loaded over here. Let me know if the sound's still okay. All right, so I've got the file on my screen, and I have, did I spray the stabilizer? I don't think I did. So let's get that piece that I've already sprayed. All right, and we can talk about hooping our stabilizer. We'll set that one aside. We'll grab this one. And just like when we're doing any other machine embroidery, we really want to have our stabilizer hooped nice and tight. And so, you know what? Do you want to go back to the overhead, the sewing table view? And I'll show what I mean by hooping nice and tight. So this is that piece of stabilizer that I sprayed in my taco box. And here's my embroidery hoop. And it's sticky, so it wants to stick up on itself. And I do have a ceiling fan on, so it's kind of blowing in the breeze here. But the hardest part for me about machine embroidery is getting a flat surface clear enough so I can do a good hooping. If you find that your embroidery quality is not as perfect as you'd like it, let's start with a good hooping technique. And the biggest part of that is having a nice flat surface so that your hoops can be flat. So I've got my hoop down, the bottom hoop. I've laid my stabilizer on top of it, and then I'm going to place the inner hoop in there and just make sure that everything is nice and tight. When my embroidery stabilizer is tight enough, it kind of has a little drum sound. It may be hard to hear right here, but it's tight enough. I could further tighten it up, but I don't want to over tighten my hoop. And then I'm going to get my piece of Cuddle, and remember I wrote the nap on it. So here's the top, and this is going to go down. I'm going to center this over my frame. Now I've been doing a bunch of these over the last couple of days, so I'm fairly confident that this is a good place for my fabric to be. I'm not necessarily going to hoop my Cuddle fabric in this kind of a hoop. If I had a magnet hoop, I absolutely would let the Cuddle be in the magnet hoop. But with one of these kind of hoops where I have an interior and an exterior where they snap together like this, I'm not going to hoop the Cuddle. Not because I'm going to hurt the Cuddle, but because it's just so thick that I don't want to put it in there. All right. So it's not a question of can you, it's a question of I don't want to. That's the reason. All right, let's go back to the embroidery machine because I think we're ready to embroider now. Okay, there we are. All right. So over here at my embroidery machine, I'm going to orient. I got to put my hoop on. Okay. And I've just got brown thread. So remember our applique is going to be that black cherry color. But we're really not going to see our thread. So I've got brown thread in the needle, and I need to switch the orientation of this heart so that it's up and down. Remember, because the top of our fabric is up there. So let me adjust the orientation of our heart. So I've got to do that. Let's see. We're going to spin him around. There he is. Now he's right side up. Say okay. And I'm going to double check that I've got the right hoop on, because it thinks I've got a 4x4 hoop on, and I don't. I have this 5x7 one. So we'll tell that okay. And now it knows that that heart is in the center. And because I've done this a bunch, I don't have to reset it. But you could do a trace just to make sure that your embroidery is right there. Some of the newer embroidery machines will actually project your image so that you can see exactly where your embroidery is going to end up. Whatever you've got to do to get it in the right place is good. But I'm going to go ahead and put my presser foot down and start running on the background fabric. I'm going to run a placement stitch. So this placement stitch is actually going to show me where I'm going to put my fabric down so that the machine can do the applique for me. So it's got a placement stitch that it's stitched out. It's just that heart shape. And it's just going to do this shape like 3 times. So it's going to do a placement stitch. Then it's going to do a tack down stitch. And that's where I'm going to trim. And then we're going to do the actual applique. So let me show you what this placement stitch looks like once it's done. It's kind of hard to see actually. But you can kind of see the heart on there. Okay, see the outline of the heart? That's our placement stitch. So I'm going to put it back on the machine, and I'm going to cover placement stitch with the applique fabric. And in this case, it's hard to do when I'm working around the camera. Okay. In this case, the applique fabric is our quilting color. So just like I did for my Luxe Cuddle background, I'm finding the nap, the direction of the nap. I'm paying attention to that because I want it to be smooth all the way down. And I'm going to cover that whole area with this applique material. And now I'm going to run, gotta put the press foot down. I'm going to run a tack down stitch. Now, while this is running, I'm paying attention to what is happening here. I'm not just walking away. So I'm going to make sure that this stays nice and smooth on the embroidery machine and it's not going to pucker up. You could put some magnets or some pins to keep everything smooth and tidy for you if you need to. I'm simply just holding it a little bit, just a little bit, I'm not yanking on it. I was just holding it out of the way. So it's running that tack down stitch, and that tack down is kind of a double. So it's 2 layers or 2 runarounds of the stitching. Okay, so now that one is done. And now I can come over here. I'm going to move that just a tiny bit. I can take this off the arm of the embroidery arm again. All right. And now the heart, see the heart embroidered on there? And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take these little tiny snips and cut away the applique material. Now, these little snips are nice because I can get really close in there. If you have other applique scissors that you like using, by all means, use those. I like these because they just feel good in my hands. Not all, you get what you like and you use what you like. I'm just snipping that away. One of the things that I'm doing, though, as I'm snipping, is I'm kind of giving a little tension to the fabric. Remember we talked about how Cuddle's a knit fabric? In this case, I'm using that to my advantage, and I'm actually pulling just a little bit on the fabric so that when I cut, I get a nice clean line. Do you see how clean that line is right there? It's because I'm tugging. I'm not yanking on it, but I'm tugging just a little bit so that I get a nice clean line. Okay, it may not be as clean of a line as I normally would be getting if I'm not reaching around a camera, but it's still a nice clean line. And remember that with Cuddle fabric, you have a little bit of wiggle room because the fabric is so fluffy.
Hey, Sheila.
Yes.
We have a question that someone asked, Janet asked, just to clarify, you did not use any adhesive to hold down the top Cuddle.
I did not. That's a really great question. Did you hear me gasp? You just scared me.
I'm sorry.
That's a great question. I didn't use any adhesive. I didn't for a couple of different reasons. So I'm thinking about how I want it to feel, right? And sometimes when you use adhesive, that depending on your adhesive, now 505 doesn't do it, but other adhesives might dry and then they make it crunchy feeling. Okay. So I don't want crunchy Cuddle. The other thing is that I don't really need it. I mean, you need to practice this technique. So when we do machine embroidery, we're always learning, what works best. It's like finding your own recipe. So you may really need something like 505, or maybe you want to use pins, or maybe you want to use like the Sew Tights magnets way out on the edges of your hoop, or you might want to completely hoop the whole thing with your magnetic hoops. I found that this is just efficient for me, and so I don't use 505 spray or something else to hold the applique material down. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, but you've got to find your recipe, what you like. Some people like to put Heat and Bond Light on the back of their applique material, and then at the end of the project, they'll fuse that to the background piece. That's a totally acceptable thing to do too. I don't particularly care for the way that feels inside my project, so I don't do it. But it's thinking about the end in mind. That's a great question though, because we all have little things that we like, and when you're cooking at home, your family, everybody may have a recipe for chicken spaghetti. That's a thing around here, or when I grew up, everybody had chicken spaghetti. But everybody's chicken and spaghetti recipe was a little bit different. So some people used, a certain brand of seasoned salt, and some people used a certain brand of tomatoes. If chicken and spaghetti isn't your thing, it's a chicken, and it's basically chicken soup and spaghetti noodles together in a casserole with cheese. Okay, some people would use Velveeta in their chicken and spaghetti, and other people would use like real cheese. So it's just a matter of what recipe you grew up with. This is what you like. So I kind of treat machine embroidery like that. Like, it's your recipe. You'll figure out what you like and do it that way. That's totally fine. I'm not going to criticize anybody else's chicken and spaghetti recipe, because chicken and spaghetti is good. Okay, I was rethreading my machine because it came unthreaded. But what is happening now is it's doing the finishing stitch. So this is that blanket stitch I was telling you about. It's going to give it some texture, and it's going to finish that applique. Some finishing stitches are a zigzag stitch. Sometimes they're like a lace effect. It can be a nice thick satin stitch. That's a finishing stitch too. Because it's Cuddle doesn't fray. And so I could even just leave it with those regular tack down stitch, and that would be enough to hold it down because the Cuddle isn't going to fray or come apart later. So, oh, I see another question from Stephanie. Why didn't I use water soluble stabilizer on the top? I know for some Cuddle embroidery, we do use that on top. So just curious, why not this time? Actually, a really great question. Because we would use a topper when we want to make sure that our stitches show up on top. And for this project, I don't necessarily need my stitching to show up as much as just the texture of the stitching. Does that make sense? That maybe that may not make sense yet. I'll show you in just a minute what I mean. But I'm not using a topper, first of all, because I don't want to have to pick it out or peel it out or wash it out. However you get your topper out. No, I didn't use it because I'm thinking about the end and do I want it, how I want it to feel. If you've been in one of my classes, I've talked about this a lot, but I am completely grossed out by the texture of wash away stabilizer that gets wet on any fabric. Actually, it's not just Cuddle, but anything. Just the gooiness of wash away stabilizer can it really is unpleasant for me. So I will avoid it as much as possible. I found that the Wonderfill lace made stabilizer doesn't get gummy. And so, but that's not really a topper stabilizer. That's like a backing for like freestanding lace. So if Wonderfill is listening, we could really use a topper that isn't gooey. So there's a room in the market for that. But because I'm just getting texture with the stitching and not necessarily needing the thread to show up, I'm not using a topper on this one. Let me grab one thing right over here and I'll show you what I mean.
Okay, Sheila, so I have a question while you're grabbing that.
Yeah.
It says, so topper for embroidered initials and pictures, but not for applique.
Well, see, sometimes, I mean, yeah, that's a maybe. These are good questions. And this is really like, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. I don't want to say yes or no, depending on what the effect you're wanting is, right? And I'm going to come over here. So our embroidery is done. I'm going to bring this over here so we can switch to the, let's switch to the overhead camera or the sewing machine camera. And I'll come do this over here. Okay. And we can talk about what I grabbed from across the room. Here's our finished embroidery. And we've got our little fluff pieces. Ordinarily, I would have my little vacuum cleaner and I would go and get these trims off. When I trimmed a little bit, I cut a little bit of the fluff of the background material. And so that's why there's some fluff here. But really, most of this fluff is just a little bits of the quilting Cuddle that I use for the applique. So it's not a whole lot really at all. If you're using bigger scissors, that is something I wanted to talk about. Because if I'm using regular scissors, which you can use for applique, even my my favorite Kai 5130 curved applique scissors, I find that when I'm using those for this, I cut more of the background than I want to, which is why I like these itty bitty ones the best for this. Okay. Absolutely not shears for doing applique down in an embroidery hoop because the blade's flat. Okay, so let's talk about that that topper issue. So here's a piece of machine embroidery that has a couple of different things. It's got applique and it's got lettering. Okay, so this just is lettering. It says 10 tiny toes. This is an AccuQuilt die, which I think is just so cute. We've talked about this in another episode of Cuddle and embroidery. I know we did this with Dawn Chase, but we did lots of applique with these little dies. And so for this part, I did not use any topper. Okay. because the embroidered file that I used had so many little stitches right here that I would have to pick out pieces of plastic from between each of those if something didn't peel away. Because remember, I told you I have texture issues. I'm not going to wash this because I don't want to. That's why. I'm like just going to be honest. Like, I don't want to go wash something just to get the stuff out. Over here for the lettering, I did use some topper, and you can see there's pieces of it still in there, which, this isn't done. So I need to keep working on this and do some handwork to get those pieces of topper out of there. And knowing myself, I probably used a heat away topper, so that's not going to come out by washing or getting it wet. And I know people, they'll be like, oh, I just use a Q-tip dipped in water. Well, that's still going to melt that plastic, and that's going to go into my fabric and then make it feel in a way that doesn't make me happy. So you know what your preferences are, and you know what you're comfortable with. That's just what I'm going to do. The other thing that I could do to make these stitches stand out a little bit more is I could put a knockdown stitch behind them. And then that way they've laid down the nap of the Cuddle. Remember, this is C3. So this has 3 millimeters of fiber sticking up off the background. Okay. The Luxe Cuddle, this is 10 millimeters of fiber. So that's almost a centimeter long pieces of fabric that's sticking up over the background. C3 is 3 millimeters. Luxe starts at 10 and goes up from there. Quilting Cuddle is very, very flat. So this it is 1.5 millimeters. So it's very, very thin. It's a really nice contrast between the Quilting Cuddle and the Luxe Cuddle. Here's another example. So here's another little stuffy guy. This embroidery, I did use a topper behind it. No knockdown stitching for his little face. But I did not use a topper because the embroidery is clear enough and thick enough to show up even without using a knockdown stitch behind it. Now, to help it stand up, you can use a topper if you want to, but you're going to have to pick it out. And so there's places like right here in between these things, like I'm going to have to do a lot of work. And I'm pretty sure that I did not use any topper because I would still be able to see it, because I know about myself that I hate doing that. So I would not have done that. Okay. So those are just reasons why. You have to decide what you're comfortable with. There's no rule. There's just recipes. How about that? Okay.
So Sheila, will you tell us the name of your little nippers that you were using to trim around your heart again?
So these are probably these ones are by Havel's. Lots of different designers have one. I know Von Mori has some. They have a kit of scissors that has one. There's a Tulip Pink Rainbow version one that's super cute. They're functionally, they're called iris snips. And so eye doctors will use these when they're doing eye surgery. Is that gross? Yeah. That's what they're for. So we borrowed all these tools from, the medical industry. And now they're quilt tools, but that's what they're called. They're called iris snips. They've got a curved tip, which makes them really nice for getting down in the hoop and doing the applique. But they're just a neat spring little thing. And then also too, if you have issues with your fingers, inside the loops of scissors, that can be a thing sometimes. These are nice because you're just squeezing them. They're kind of like spring loaded kind of things. So they're super nice. Let's see. Time to make those kids work off their tacos. Oh, they'll love that. They have all kinds of little things they have to work for me for. Like, now you're washing away embroidery stabilizer for me too. Okay, I'm going to set those things aside. Let's look at this guy. So we can take our heart out of the hoop now. Set our hoop aside. And this is our embroidery. I'm going to shake it off over here. And I got a vacuum later, so don't, it's fine. It's fine. So I can see one of the things that I want to do before I do anything else is that some of my fibers kind of went under the applique. So they're under there. because they were under the whole thing. And so I'm just going to use my fingernail. You can use your stiletto. You can use the tip of a pen or your scissors and kind of, I'm going to fluff those fibers around. And do you see the texture? It's hard to see on the, there you go. You can see the texture of those blanket stitches. Ooh, I love that. That makes me really, really happy. Trimmage of the background would be worth using a tearaway under the heart. Well, you know, that's a good reason why you might want to consider using a tearaway. I mean, not a tearaway, but a topper underneath the heart if you're worried about trimming that. Yeah. So I think that would be if you want to practice and see what you feel is worth it, you totally could. You could put your topper down, then you could put your applique fabric, let the applique go around, and then as you're trimming, the topper would kind of protect the background from getting so much fluff. So yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I hadn't considered that. I see somebody asked, what's a knockdown? A knockdown is a layer of stitches that flattens the fabric so that your embroidery can pop. And let me show you a knockdown. So over here on this Harper that I showed you earlier, see his ear? See how these very thin stitches really stand out? It's because that behind them, I've done what's called knockdown stitching behind the design that's flattened the fibers. Let me get really, really close. Do you see, like right in there? See that texture? That is a layer of knockdown stitches, and it stitches in a grid. So this way and then this way, that's called a bidirectional knockdown stitch if you want to get technical. I like a bidirectional knockdown stitch on Cuddle because it's a lot of stitches that hold it down, but it's not really stiff. So this is still nice and soft and squishy, which is what you want. So that any stitches that I did afterwards, which those are just running stitches, they show up really nicely on his ear because of those knockdown stitches. Even this little bitty, you know, those are tiny. I'm very proud of those. They're very tiny little letters that show up really clearly on Cuddle because of the knockdown stitch. Okay, is the heart that you just did a bigger size than the red and white sample block? Yes, that's a good question. So yes, this block right here, these squares, I believe, let's see, let me get it someplace I can measure quickly. Yeah, so these squares were 8 inches. I cut them at 8 inch. We're going to take a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so it finishes where there's 7 inches. So this block is 7 by 7 by 7. It's a 7 by 7 by 7 cube. This one right here, I cut these blocks at 9 inches. So when we get done, this block will be an 8-inch cube. Okay, so 8 by 8 by 8. Okay, this little block right here, this one, I cut these at 6 inches so that when it finishes, now it's 5 inches wide because there's a 1/2 inch gone from each side. So now it's a 5-inch cube. And he could have used some, I did not put that soft and stable on the back of him. So see how he's a little bit more round than cubish? I mean, it's not bad, but he's obviously not as structured as this guy is. This one, the big red one, I believe he is also, yeah, he's a 9-inch block. So this is the size that, no, wait. I could be wrong. Yep. Yeah, he was 9. So this is 9 by 9. And so he's a 9 by 9 by 9 cube. And that's the size we're making right now. Okay. This little guy that I already showed you, the inside one, I think he's also the 6-inch size. Yep. So he ends up 5 by 5. Okay. So that was a good question. Very observant. Y'all are really observant. You could also put, Heidi, I see y'all talking about the knockdown. You also could put a knockdown around it. That is another way to do it. And in places where you have an applique like this, where you have lots of divots inside, you might want a knockdown to kind of hide some of that fluff. Or you might want the fluff to fluff up and be fluffy. There's no wrong answer there, but those are really good questions. Okay, so now that our applique is done, this really doesn't take that long. Okay, we're just talking a lot. Okay, but I'm going to cut off my stabilizer. Okay, now I could just cut it off around the back of the heart. I could just cut it off. But because I have this structure in here already. I'm just cutting off the extra stabilizer. Okay, now do I have to cut it? No, I don't have to cut it. I just want to have good lines when I'm sewing because I'm going to be sewing the block, and visually the stabilizer can get in the way and make me think that I'm sewing on the fabric when I'm really not. And so I'm just cutting those edges of stabilizer. You could use a ruler and do it a little bit more tidy than I'm doing there. One other thing that I'm going to do first before we go over to our sewing machine is I'm going to give myself some guidelines. So remember I told you we're going to do 1/2-inch seams. The grid on my mat, these are 1/2-inch squares. And so I'm going to put little 1/2-inch squares in the corner of each of these pieces of my blocks. And I've already done that on some of these other ones. Do you see how my stabilizer is bigger than my block actually is? So I got to think about the block and not the stabilizer. And then this way, I know that I'm not going to sew out here. So when I sew these blocks together, I'm not sewing from edge to edge. I'm sewing from 1/2 inch away from the edge to 1/2 inch away from the edge. And when I do that, I get nice points on the corners of my blocks. If I go all the way across, then I have a lot of bulk at the corners, and that is not a good look. And so I've learned that I'm going to go from 1/2 inch away and end 1/2 inch. And I'm going to do that on all my blocks so that, oh, these aren't even trimmed. Let's trim those up real quick. So that when I'm sewing, I can just sew and I don't really have to think a whole lot. All right. So let's just get rid of the stabilizer and get these all marked. I thought I had done that on these, but I must have done that on that tiny one. Let's see. I totally stole this. I know I've done it way more times than the reason I'm telling y'all that this is how I'm going to do it is because I have to talk myself through it because I have done it the wrong way more times than I am comfortable telling you. I mean, I'm telling you, like, you know all my secrets now. So be better. Don't do it as wild and crazy as I do it. Be better. All right. Jason April says, I'd love to learn to sew myself one of these. Yeah, you absolutely can. In fact, Ginger, do you want to grab the link for it? It's over on the Shannon Fabrics page on the free patterns, the baby projects. There is a link for the basic cube, and you can totally do that with any of your Cuddle pieces. So this version right here that I'm doing, the 9x9, doesn't take hardly any fabric at all. So if you get a yard of each, you know, for your background and your applique, you're going to have enough fabric to make quite a few little hearts or little cubes. This is the 9x9 size, and I didn't use a whole 1/2 of a yard. Okay, 1/2 of a yard is plenty. A whole yard gives you at least enough to do 2 or 3 cubes. If you're doing the smaller size, you can get a whole bunch out of that. So if you're placing your applique like I'm doing it with pre-cut squares, then you have to pay a little bit more attention at the embroidery machine to get it centered. But you can absolutely utilize some of that extra fabric to embroider, then cut your squares, and then you've got fussy cut, so you know it's absolutely right where you want it to be instead. Okay, I can cut straight without a ruler. Yeah, that I can cut a pretty straight line. Not always, sometimes. Okay, let's go over to the sewing machine. So Ginger, go ahead and put up the ingredients list for us because I want to make sure everybody gets that. So put up the ingredients, and I'm going to switch my camera view so that we can have a sewing machine view because it's a little bit different. Okay, so everybody take a look at the ingredients just so that you know what you might want to use. And let's double check here. Okay, I think we're right on it. Okay, so you can move back to sewing view. And, you know, let's just pretend that we just did a whole bunch of embroidery and we are ready to sew. Oh, by the way, one other thing that you might want to get at the free pattern. So if you're making Harper and Barkley, you can get a sweater for Harper. This is my next thing to do later today. A sweater for Harper so you can make Harper his and Barkley their own clothes. Isn't that fun? It's also over there. Okay, when I'm going to put my cube together, I'm going to think about the layout of how it needs to be. And I want it to say LOVE going around the block. So this is going to go LOVE. If I put them together, in line like this is not really going to give me the cube that I want. So I'm going to think about arranging them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the L first. So that's the front of my block, roughly. I'm going to put the O next to it. And I'm thinking about those 1/2 inch squares. They're not on these. They're on that other piece with the heart that we did. But I'm going to start with my needle in at a 1/2 inch. Double check that my foot's on really good. And I'm going to give myself a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to stop at 1/2 inch from this finished edge. Okay. I've got gray 50 weight polyester embroidery thread in the needle. And you know what? Let me get a new bobbin because that one's almost out. It's got goodness. I don't even have enough to do that next line.
Sheila, while you're doing that, we have Brenda and Kathy, both who said that they're going to make blocks for their great granddaughters.
Oh my
granddaughters that are coming using their names on the block. Wouldn't that be so cute?
That would be absolutely adorable. Absolutely. So cute. One of the things you could also do if you have a sublimation printer and you get some of the regular Cuddle, like the C3 or the quilting Cuddle. I mean, you could do this on Lex Cuddle too, but it'll show up really well on C3 or quilting Cuddle. If you have a sublimation printer, you could actually print photos on there and have a photo block. Wouldn't that be cute?
Oh my gosh, that would be so fun. So in place of the heart, you could do a photo of the child or something. Oh, yeah. Fun. That's a fun idea.
There's no end to what we can do here, is there? Okay, I'm going to get my pins, and I'm going to put a pin at the beginning here. Remember where I told you about that 1/2 inch? I'm going to put my pin there. When we're pinning with Cuddle, we talk a lot about double pinning, right? So I should be telling you that we should pin this whole thing down all the way. In reality, what happens on a little bitty seam like this, I may not need to use that many pins. What you need to do is you need to test and see how yours comes out. And if your stuff is wiggling all around on you, let's control it by adding more pins. Okay, so double pinning is when we're adding not just one row of pins up here, but maybe a double row of pins. So we've got lots of pins to control that edge. Our edge right here on these blocks is actually a little bit more controlled because we put SF101 on the back at the beginning. So I may not need to use this many pins. Does that make sense? So I did it right here to show you this is double pinned, but I may not do that on all the other blocks. All right, I'm going to take that first pin out. I'm going to back stitch here. I've got my seam, my stitch length at 3.5 millimeters. I have adjusted the presser foot pressure on my sewing machine so that it's not pushing down so much over here. So yours, you wherever the settings are, look in your manual to see how to adjust your presser foot pressure. And then I've got that 9014 stretch needle by Schmidt in the needle. Okay, and so I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and end of every seam. And we're going to get these blocks together. This is actually the fastest part of the whole process. I've got my spray bottle right there. I had that spray bottle out because I was putting SF101 and my, I don't know if it's the weather or the temperature, but it wasn't sticking. And somebody said to use a little bit of steam to get their SF101 to stick better. So that's what I did. And it worked great. Okay, there's my seam. If your seam, these fibers, see how those fibers might be caught down in there? If they are, and that bugs you, you can kind of fluff those fibers out. You could use the tip of your stiletto which, oh, I have one. Yeah, I do have one over here. This is my clover. That's actually an awl, but that works really well. Or you don't have to use the pointy part. You could just use the Hera, the marker part. Let's put that back on. And that works well to fluff that out too. And see, that looks so nice, and it's actually pretty seamless. So if you're not good at sewing a straight line yet, don't worry about it, because you can fluff it up and nobody will ever see your seam. Okay, so Cuddle's super forgiving. So I've got my L and my O. I'm going to put my E over here on the left side of the L. And I want my pieces to match up really well. So I'm going to put a pin at the top and the bottom. But unlike the last block, I'm not going to pin all the way in the middle. SF 101 is going to stabilize that quite well for me, so I'm not super worried about it. Okay, back stitch at the beginning. You can use your stiletto to help you make sure that the fabric's not buckling underneath your presser foot. But if it starts to rumple up like that, simply lift your presser foot and let it relax, and then keep going.
Okay, why did you add the E to the side of the L rather than adding it like spelling out love all the way around?
Because it makes it hard to cube it at the end. And you know what? Go ahead and pop up that diagram, because that may make it explain it a little bit better. So I put a diagram for Ginger to show us, and the diagram is kind of like the layout of how you want to stitch everything together. Do you see how the E's on the left, the L in the middle, and the O? And when this one, I'm going to put the heart at the top of the L, but our bottom block is going to be blank. And then we'll have the V at the very end. And that way, when we spell LOVE, it goes all the way around the block. Now, do you have to do it like this? No, not at all. This is just the way I'm doing it, because in my head, LOVE should go around the block. If in your head that is not the way it works, then don't do it that way. It's your recipe. Your chicken spaghetti is just as good as anybody else's. All right, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. You know, and it's funny because we all things make sense to us in our brain, and if the way I say to do something doesn't make sense, it's okay. My feelings aren't going to get hurt if you found a way that works better for you. So the important thing is that we all have something that we love at the end of it. That's the important thing. But this is sewing. Nobody's getting hurt over sewing. Okay. So here's
Okay. Carrie Ann has a tip for us too, that wooden chopsticks are good for seam fluffing too.
Oh yeah, chopsticks are great, and they're generally easily available.
Right.
And if you weren't having chicken and spaghetti for dinner, how about takeout? So get yourself some chopsticks or tacos or a pizza box. The dangerous thing about doing sew together at lunchtime is that we're all generally a little snacky. Okay. So now I'm going to put my V on, and I'm going to put my V upside down over my heart. And that way, when it's all together, the V will be on the side of the E. So it'll say LOVE. And this is a trust the process kind of thing. But if you were, we're doing a little bit of fabric origami here. So I'm going to pin the V on upside down. And the other thing too, that when I took care of my nap, so all of my letters, as they go around the block, the nap's going to be going down the same way. And also because of the heart at the top, so the nap is going down from the top down. So it's going to go down that way too. So that's the thing that makes my brain happy. Your brain may not need that, and you can do it however you want to, but that gives me a little bit of extra, I don't know, dopamine. We got to take it where we can get it. Okay. You may notice that one of the things that I'm doing, because I've got all these layers and I've got this extra stabilizer, I'm kind of just fiddling with it to keep everything in control. If I had used a fusible stabilizer, for my embroidery part, I absolutely could fuse that to the whole thing so that that's not flipping out and giving me, it's not giving me issues, but I am paying attention to it. So I want to just be mindful of that extra layer there, even though it's not really in the way, but it is there. Okay. Now all my blocks are together except for the one under the L. I've got a blank block. Let's find that piece. It's way over here on this side of the room. Okay, here's our last piece, and I'm going to put this on the bottom. Now I got to figure out the nap on this one because I didn't put any embroidery. You could put some embroidery. You could do that nap. This is top to bottom. So now when I cut this and go all the way around from the heart to the, yeah, it's going to be right. That works for me. Now see, these are not sewn down together at the end. And so what that means is that as I'm putting this piece on, instead of trapping the corner of the E in the seam, the corner of the E is free. And then I'll have a super nice corner down here under the L, which is the front of the block. I mean, it's a block. Is it a front? I don't know. But these sides are free. And so I'll just have nice corners. I'm using Clover flower head pins, and I'm using the strong ones that come in the box. They're a little bit thicker than regular pins. They're very strong and very sharp and very long. And I like these pins a lot. I got a little silly during the cold weather that we had, and I put gems on all of mine. So now they look like little peacock feathers. And that's why, but they're just regular Clover flower head pins. That's all. I know somebody's going to be like, where'd you get those pins? I'm like, you get them at your quilts. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing on this bottom block, and this doesn't have that stabilizer for me to worry about, so that's nice. But I am paying attention to that seam. And you don't have to go super fast. You can take your time. It's a little rumple right there. I don't want to rumple, but I'm going to stop right there, half an inch away. And now my whole piece is together. So this is my whole block. It is hard to see it under here, but we're going to start folding these edges up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bottom piece, fold it up to this E. So our cube will start coming together. So there's the L under there. Here's the E. And I'm going to sew the seam underneath the bottom of the E. The pattern kind of guides you through the process of, sew E to L and bottom of E to the bottom of the block, or I don't even know how it's listed at the moment, but it guides you through which one to do next. But there's really not a wrong order. I don't really need a pin down here because this is secured. But in order to get the L block out of the way, I'm kind of pinching it diagonally and pulling it out away from me. I'll show you a little bit more clearly when we get up there.
I was just going to ask how you keep from like sewing other letters to, like the wrong letter to the seam. Yeah.
So that's why I made that diagram for me, just to help my brain go straight. But then also I'm pulling this out. So this is kind of folded away. The corner is kind of folded up in there, and I'm actually not going to sew over it. I'm just sewing right up to that seam where we did the side. So I'm just going right up there. And then instead of ending down here, when I backed up to lock my seam, I ended up away from it a little bit. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'll end it in there. Okay. So we've already got a cube happening. So I'm going to do the same thing with the O in the bottom piece. And I'm going to go from this time I'm going to go from, let's see. Nope. Yeah. It's kind of like an origami thing. I'm going to put a pin in it. Let's put a pin in this.
It is like origami. This is like making my brain hurt.
It's just because you don't have it in your hand. When you have it in your hand, and once you have that whole diagram thing, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. But you're watching me do this, so it's kind of like watching somebody do a video as they're going through a store and you get kind of dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't make anybody dizzy, but it is a little origami-ish.
And the diagram is listed in the pattern.
The diagram is part of the pattern. I mean, like we showed part of it here, but if you're going to put, the names, so say you've got a name like maybe Sierra, or I guess if you have more than 6 letters in your name, you got to figure out which letters are the ones you want to use. But you could put 1 letter on every block, or you could put a different name on every block. Maybe you're going to do it with all of your grandkids' names and have yourself your own little block. If you got more than 6 grands too, that's another thing.
Oh, that's a good idea that you could like embroider the entire name on the block versus just a single letter.
You absolutely could. Okay, so here's our LOV or LOE. Okay, so we've got a cubish. The bottom has 3 sides together. And now the top, let's see. I wonder if I can get further away. Yeah. See, there's our V that would come around. And when you're looking at the inside of the block, that LOV and then E, see how they go around like that? When we turn it right side out, it'll be just fine. So instead of working on the V, because this is a flap right now, let's work on the heart, and let's get the heart sewn down to the O and the E. Okay, because we sewed it already to the L. So let's go from this little dot right here. That's the one we made our marks on. Oops, I'm going to lose those pins. And then let's put a pin in the bottom right here, right at the end of the seam. Get those all lined up together. Did we talk about stuffing?
Jason April Robinson said you make this look easy.
Well, it is easy. I mean, I say that. I know that sometimes doing like a 3D project it's kind of a mind game,
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun. I mean, we quilt because our brains love that puzzly thing that happens, when we're cutting things apart and putting them back together. It's like a puzzle. So
it kind of is, yeah.
This is really just like that. It's just a different kind of 3D thing. Okay, so here's that other one. There's not a whole lot of seams here. This really doesn't take that long. It's just that I'm talking the whole time.
But you're teaching us really good things. Like I've learned a lot today.
Well, this is better than when I'm talking to myself and then I'm teaching myself really hard things because I've messed it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to talk to myself when I'm sewing too. That's how I figure it out, right?
Right. Okay, can you see that we've got a cube-ish thing here? So there's the inside of our cube, and our last flap is the V. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the V. I'm going to sew these 2 sides of the V down. And then the bottom part, this is what's going to touch the bottom of the block. I'm going to sew just a little bit of each side down to it. I'm going to leave a little opening. I'm not going to leave the whole thing open, because if I leave the whole thing open, then I've got to hand sew the whole thing closed. So I'm going to give myself just enough room to turn it right side out and then stuff it. That's all I'm going to leave the opening for. A lot of people don't like hand sewing, and I'm like, well, how much hand sewing do we actually need to do on this? This isn't super huge. So I can get away with a 3-inch opening right here. Okay, so that's what I'm going to leave open right here. But I got to sew these 2 little sides. I got to sew the V to the E and then the V to the O first before I sew the V, the bottom side of the V to the bottom. Oh. And this is actually kind of cool too. So because we're putting that hand sewing at the very back on the bottom, if you're not super confident in your hand sewing, it's okay because it's down there at the back of the bottom and it's a lot less noticeable. So,
well, and just like with sewing on your machine, when you fluff it up, it kind of disappears, right?
Exactly. That works. Hand sewing. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Kathy Hibbler gives us a really good idea. She said, you've given me another idea. I'm going to put the name of a grandchild on each side of the block. make 2 cubes and use them as dice and play a game for holidays. We do charades, and the littles love to participate.
Oh my gosh, that is a fabulous idea. I love that.
Fun.
I love that. The way this is what's so fun about doing this together. And part of why I love Sew Together. I'm like, the creative energy that just happens when we're all together there's nothing like it. That's an awesome idea, Kathy.
Someone earlier said too, in the very beginning, as we were kind of getting started, that you could actually make these like large die. So actually put like the pips on them, like, on a dice, and then use them for games.
You totally could. And you don't have to use machine embroidery to do that. You could just do some regular sewing machine applique to do that. I'm just not good at sewing machine applique. So for me, I'm going to harness the power of my embroidery software and digitize anything that I need applique and then do it over there because it's always perfect. Well, it has the potential to be perfect.
Right. Right.
I'm not going to be so bold as to say, oh, it's always perfect over there. But sometimes things happen, but let me not be that bold to say that. Okay, I'm just sewing the edges on the bottom of that part with the V in the bottom come together. And this is just about not even 2 inches total of stitching on each side. So, and then we are done. And then we can talk about stuffing too, because stuffing has been one of those things that, there's lots and lots of options. So here's our cube from the inside. Okay, LOVE. There's our bottom piece. Here's our opening right here. So now this is a big enough opening for me to put my hand in. If I couldn't put my hand in, or if on a day when my hands hurt, because that happens sometimes, I might want to use that easy point and turner tool to do this. Like this part of pushing with this hand and pulling with this hand, that can be painful. So the easy point and turner makes that a lot easier. Today, everything's feeling pretty good. So,
well, and I was going to say, it probably gets harder when you get to the smaller size block, right? When you're doing that little tiny block is hard.
Right. And it's still early in the day too. So later in the day, also that could be a thing. Or when it's colder and, and so I'm just using my finger to kind of push these corners out. See how nice that corner, I'm like, I know it's Cuddle and it's fluffy, but I can see that nice corner and that makes me very happy because we started and ended right there at a 1/2 inch on every one of those. Oh,
it does make such a crisp square.
It is a nice crisp square, which is funny to say with Cuddle, like, oh, we want crisp squares for our nice squishies.
Right. But I get it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's our cube. And all we have to do now is stuff him. So I grabbed some stuffing. Oh, I grabbed a couple of different kinds. And I wanted to show you because these are they're two commonly available kinds. But there are different kinds of stuffing out there in the world. And so people might have different feelings. And you know what? Let's go ahead and put it back on the front, the regular view, so we can talk about these. Okay. So hi. See y'all again. Stuffing. This is my go-to. So polyfill is my go-to. I really like the silky polyfill, but it's been really hard to find. So the purple polyfill is what I generally can get more often than not. I've tried other brands and they're not all equal. I only know that because I've tried them. So if you have a particular favorite for your favorite kind of stuffing, then use that. Absolutely. If you try to save money on stuffing, that's when I find that I get into trouble and then I end up with something that I'm not happy with at all. And I've bought plenty of bad stuffing that I can say confidently, don't just get the cheapest. Okay. What I found yesterday, and this is something, you may have seen this all around. This was called Polyfill Joyfill stuffing, and that's what I'm going to use here. And it says extra springy and soft. Comes in a 12-ounce bag. This is a 12-ounce bag too. So this bag is actually a little bit bigger, the Ultra Plush, than the Joyfill. And I don't know if this is just rebranded or if it's actually truly new, but I want you to see the fibers. So look at this. It's got like shiny, silky, rayon looking fibers in there. And this feels really nice. So that's what I'm going to use to stuff this big block with. And maybe I have enough that I can stuff the little block with too. So I'm going to go ahead and stuff it because I want to show you some hand sewing thing. Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you that are asking, yes. So if you're watching live, let us know that you're watching live. But if you come back later and you're watching this on the replay, this is archived on YouTube for as long as, you know, YouTube and all of that exists. So yeah, it'll be here for ever. Sadly, I had one video, I was doing something and, you know, I made a mess and it's on there forever. So the magic of the internet. But yeah, so I'm just stuffing it in. And, you know, when you're stuffing, you don't want to, I just stuffed a big clump in there. You don't want to do that. You want to stuff little handfuls in there. And then before it gets too full, you want to kind of push it into the corners. If you're doing something with like limbs, you know, like Barkley, I stuff into the nose and the head, get that all firm before I start stuffing the body too. So, oh, April's wearing your Cuddle robe. Oh, nice. I'm so glad. It's just fun to do this with you. Is this new one kind of like squish? Oh, Stephanie, I don't know. I have a basket full of Squishmallows that the dog got that I mean, we're still just sad that the dog got them. So we just put them in the basket for them to be fixed one day, and we haven't done it yet. I have to go look at the fill in that. I don't know. The other stuffing that I really like using is the Shannon Fabrics has some pillows, some pillow forms. They're not all in here because I took them with me last week when I taught a class. But the filling in those pillow forms are called dreamy pillows. Is that right, Ginger? What are they called?
Something like that. I'm gonna go find them.
Okay. They are so, that filling is so good that I have been tempted to cut one open and use that as filling for something like this because it's like a gel and memory foam mix. And so it's very supportive. The supportive filling. Anyway, this is nice though. So I don't mind using this. It actually feels really good putting it in. And again, like I have those texture issues and not all filling. Like I don't want to touch all filling. Okay, so I'm just stuffing it in until it's got the shape. And then you can keep working on, you know, filling the different areas of your cube. This one's big. I should have stuffed the small one first because now I'm going to be here for a while getting this all right. But you can spend a lot of time getting it just right. But because of the structure, I love the way those big letters look on this. This is Sweet Dreams. Connie, thank you. Oh, yeah, I see. Ginger, you put it in there. Sweet Dreams is the name of the Shannon pillow forms. Okay, so this is good. And this is so soft. I'm going to say that this one, even with the SF101 on the back, plus the poly mesh stabilizer, the soft and stable is what it's called, is actually squishier than this little one that also has SF101, but I used regular polyfill for that one. So this is good stuff. This is the Joy Fill polyfill. All gone. I'm glad I got 2 bags. Okay, so I love that. This is it. Let's talk about hand sewing because this is something that I do feel strongly about too. So remember when we were talking about the bonded polyester thread? I already have a needle loaded up with it, but I'm going to use I've got a needle that's a little bit longer and stronger than a regular hand sewing needle, like for quilting. And I've got my bonded polyester thread in there. It's, I don't even need to double it up, but I'm going to double it up because I want to anchor my thread, because if I don't double it up and I just have a knot there, because Cuddle is a knit fabric, my knot could just pop through the fabric. Okay, so like, you know, like you've got a knot, you pull it through and you think it's going to hang on, and it pops right through because your fabric has a loose weave, or it's just a knit fabric. It's just what happens. Catherine says, were you saying there's a file? Oh, hey, Kippy. A file for Barkley applique. There's a file for his eyes. So the file is a machine embroidery file to do his eyes if you want to do those on the embroidery machine. And I say all that for Barkley, for Harper. If you're giving this to a stuffed toy to a baby, you want to either put the hand sewing Cuddle eyes that come in your kit. You want to hand sew those on, or you want to use the machine embroidery eyes rather than using those safety eyes. Because even though they're called safety eyes, they can still be removed. They can still be chewed out by a dog or yanked out by a really aggressive toddler. You know how they are. And so they're not safe as in not being choking hazards. They're just safe as in they have a little locking washer on the back of them. So think about who you're making it for. If you're giving it to like somebody that's done chewing on the eyes of stuffed animals, if you're out of that stage of life, then you could definitely do that. I find that's the easiest, and they look cute to me, but I don't have babies. So one day when we have babies again, like grandkids, then I may not be putting safety eyes and things. Okay, let me show you how to anchor this. So I've got my long, strong needle, a bigger needle than a regular sewing needle. This is actually a chenille needle, like a 24 is what I like. It's a little bit thicker, but it's okay because we're using Cuddle fabric. My thread is doubled, and then I've got my knot at the end. This isn't a very tidy knot, but it's okay because it's going to be on the inside. And so I'm going to go through and anchor my thread. So I've gotten through the fabric, and then I've got my loop up here. And before I pull my loop with my knot tight to the fabric, I'm going to go into my needle. I'm going to go in with my needle through that loop. So now that loop is anchored to the fabric. That's the tip. That's all I wanted to tell you about that. When I do that, then I can continue down sewing this close, whether I'm going to use a ladder stitch or a whip stitch, whatever I'm going to do. That part alone, just anchoring the thread at that point, helps so much. So now I'm going through with a ladder stitch, and my ladder stitches are not close together. They're about 1/4 of an inch apart, and I'm just going over one side and down the other. And we can pop a diagram for a ladder stitch in a little bit later. I'll go through and put that in the comments because we've got a good one. Oh, excuse me. I got fluff on my nose. But then, once it's done, it just closes up and then you're done. So I've got a little bit left to do. I'm not going to sew by hand on camera because we all know how to do that. But I wanted to see if you have any more questions. So did I miss any questions? Let's see. We can watch the replay. Lots of people are working on stuff right now. Stephanie said this would be good with numbers or letters for homeschool. Yes. And wouldn't that be cool if this was if you did the dice thing too, you could use that for math games also. That would actually be, it'd be really fun if you put the numbers on it. And then you could do like times tables or you got to see. Oh, there's just no end to the fun that we could have with these. Okay. Let's see what else. Chores. Yes. Chores. Do you want to? Nobody will want to play with my toys without chores listed on the side. I love that, Ellen.
But it might make it more fun, right?
Who's
like
doing
spinning wheel? Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. You know what? That could actually be really fun. Especially when you have your grown kids come over, like who's in charge?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm going to make one for dishes. Yeah. So they're all on dishes when they come over.
It may be a little bit more fun when they're older and not when they're like little kids.
Right.
They might not appreciate the humor of something like that. Okay. Well, that's all I wanted to show you. So like I said, you can grab this pattern off if you want it, the embroidery files. They're on the Designs by Baby Moon website. Grab it. Use the code Shannon26 to get 10% off of it. Or any of the other quiet cubes or crinkle blocks on there. There's I know there's several animal patterns over there, and then there's one that's ABC 1, 2, 3, and I called that one a crinkle block because I talked about how to use the crinkle material on the inside of it, so that if you or your little one likes that sound of plastic going quick, 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 it will do that. That's not a sound that I'm a fan of, but that doesn't mean that your people might, not be. Oh, actually, I got that finished. I can't believe that. I just kept sewing and kept talking. Um, anyway, so now I'm done. Cut that off, put my needle aside, and our block's done. And doesn't it look good with the black cherry on the Lux Cuddle Natural? I love that so much. And somebody's gonna get these fabrics. So we have. Are you ready?
I am ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Ginger, tell us who our winners are.
Okay, our winners are Jane A. Norris at Ms. Tamp, QN4XW, and Melinda Harold.
Congratulations to our winners. I'm so glad that y'all joined us. So y'all are going to get your own pieces of Lux Cuddle and the Black Cherry Quilting Cuddle, which is new out in the world. Like, it's still very, very new. So you are some of the first to get your hands on it. And I hope that y'all make something really awesome with it. If you don't make a cuddle cube, you can still make something super yummy. And I was going to say delicious, but don't eat your cuddle. It is lunchtime, so let's go eat. And thank you guys for joining us. Oh, before we go, I want to tell you about, like, if you haven't gotten enough cuddle learning from hanging out with me today, our cuddle ambassadors are doing tons of classes this is the beginning of February, March, April. We've got a full slate of classes all over the US. So tons of them in Illinois and Indiana and Ohio. I know Minnesota, we've got a class this month. And then if you go to any of the fun fabric shows like OSQE, we're going to be at OSQE in Lakeland, Florida, and Atlanta, Georgia, and Cleveland, Ohio, or Akron. Ginger, help me.
I can't remember, but
one of those in Ohio.
It'll be on our website. Yeah,
we're going to be there, and that's March and April, and so we want to sew with you, and so we'll be doing all kinds of fun projects. So check out that link that Ginger just posted for classes and events. Sign up at your local quilt shop, and if you don't have any classes coming up at your local quilt shop, reach out to your quilt shop and say, hey, bring in some cuddle classes for us, because it's fun to sew together. Okay, tell them I said to say that. It's fun to sew together. I had a great time hanging out with you guys today, and we were just delighted to get to do something cuddly on this chilly first Sew Together Live of February. So go make something amazing. Check out your cuddle selection at your local quilt shop. Use those embroidery machines that are too expensive to just sit in the closet, and go make something cuddly. So we will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Happy sewing.